Thanks, and thanks to the Rural Independents for bringing forward this motion on the hospitality and tourism sector. And I think obviously all of us are aware of the employment contribution that this sector generates and the importance of it to our wider economy and to many local areas. And certainly I know in Dún Laoghaire we have many small businesses, coffee shops, restaurants, independent food retail outlets and so on, and many of them do at times, periodically, or numbers of them find themselves struggling to stay afloat. So I think it is a welcome discussion to look at how we ensure that employment is maintained and that these small businesses that do contribute to the vitality of towns and villages and cities indeed across the country, I think is a very important discussion. And I'm certainly open to the review or to looking at the question of that to see can it make the difference. But I have to be honest and say I'm not sure that it's going to make the difference that those who are advocating for it suggest. The motion claims that by reducing the VAT we will boost demand. Presumably the implication being that you will lower prices and therefore boost demand. Now, first of all, I would like to, I'm not just saying whether this is or isn't the case, but I'm not entirely sure that that's actually what happened when we reduced the VAT rate previously, that there was a significant reduction in prices. In fact, certainly, anecdotally, I would say there's no particular evidence of that prices went down. And I could understand it, indeed, if businesses are genuinely struggling to survive, the benefit they might get from a VAT reduction might not be passed on to the consumer in terms of lower prices precisely because they're struggling. So I'm not sure that reducing the VAT actually achieves the aims that the proposers of the motion are actually suggesting it will achieve. I am struck by the figure that the Minister mentioned in terms of what it would cost to reduce the VAT, €750 million. Now, that's a lot of money, and I think one question the proposers of the motion, anybody who's serious about this issue should ask, is if that's the sort of money we're talking about, might there be better ways to spend €750 million that would actually help and guarantee small businesses' viability? Because the downside to what the proposers are suggesting is precisely that some of the very big, profitable multinational chains and other chain businesses that are not struggling, in fact, in many cases, they are the ones who are putting huge pressure on the small independent businesses. They're crushing them, and they're highly profitable. But they will actually benefit, significantly benefit, because it's a universal measure. So I honestly ask the people who are putting forward, I empathise with where they're coming from, but I think they need to think this through. Is it actually going to achieve what they wanted to achieve, and I would like to see it achieve, in terms of helping the specifically small independent business who are being crushed by often very big businesses making huge profits that can cut prices and so on. Our view, for a very long time, and I know others are now saying it, we have been advocating, for as long as I've been in this House, for a change in the rates system, that we should have differential rates. The idea that a small business, whether it's a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker, a small coffee shop, or whatever it might be, is charged the same rates per square metre as huge multinational corporations or even banks. I mean, I think about it, you know, the banks often might have a relatively small premises whereas a restaurant has a big premises, the bank is making enormous profits while the small little restaurant or coffee shop is struggling to survive. And yet they're paying the same rates per metre squared, even though one is hugely profitable and the other one is struggling to survive. That to me makes no sense. And while I don't claim to know the details, my understanding is in France, for example, there is a very, very systematic policy of favouring the small independent business in the villages and towns over the big chains and corporations and so on who are making profits. So our view is we should have a differential rate scheme based either on turnover or profitability so that we help the small independent business as against the big ones who could afford to pay a bigger contribution in rates. The other areas are obviously energy costs. We have been arguing for years, again, particularly in the context of the huge hikes we've seen in energy costs and the massive profits being raked in by the energy companies, enormous profits that have been made while businesses and households are being absolutely hammered with energy price hikes. These companies are making enormous profits. That should be dealt with. And we have argued that we should actually control the prices of energy and put caps on it. By the way, that is allowed for in the consumer legislation, which allows for caps to be put in particular areas where there's a particular crisis or urgency to do so, and I think that's something that could be done. Similarly, in the area of insurance, while there's been some improvements, that is also a huge cost and burden. The other thing I would ask those advocating for small business to consider is that they shouldn't go down the road, and I know many don't, but they shouldn't go down the road of thinking that maybe slowing down on the moves towards the living wage or increasing the minimum wage is somehow going to be good for them. Because the truth is, if what you're talking about is increasing footfall, increasing demand, actually the biggest source of that demand are the workers themselves. And if the workers are on low pay, they don't have the money to go into the restaurants, the coffee shops, the businesses, and they are actually the biggest customer base for many of the small businesses in villages and towns. So we should actually embrace improving the wages and conditions of workers, the tens of thousands of workers who work in this sector, and actually it is a sector that's characterised by low pay, poor conditions and so on. Actually, that's cutting off your nose to spite your face. Better wages and conditions for the workers will mean they have more money in their pocket and they will spend more money in the small independent businesses in their towns, villages and cities.